touch me! You already made your choice!
Jessica, please, let me help. Sir, step away from my patient immediately. Take her upstairs.
I was 9 months pregnant, clutching my swollen belly in a dead silent house, staring at the freshly signed divorce papers. When the first agonizing contraction hit, my ex-husband declined my frantic call. I had absolutely no one. So, I grabbed my keys and drove myself into the storm. The silence in my house wasn't just quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket that pressed against my eardrums. It was a Tuesday night in late November, the kind of evening where the Seattle rain lashed violently against the window panes, mirroring the turbulent chaos that had become my life. I stood in the doorway of the nursery, the room painted in a soft, hopeful shade of pale sage. The crib, a beautiful mahogany piece we had picked out together at Pottery Barn, sat empty in the corner. We, of course, referred to Arthur and me, but there was no we anymore. There was only me, and the heavy, restless weight of my unborn daughter kicking against my ribs. Just 3 weeks ago, the judge had finalized our divorce. After 5 years of what I genuinely believed was a rock-solid marriage, Arthur had shattered my reality when I was 6 months pregnant. He didn't just leave. He detonated a bomb in the center of my life. He sat me down on our plush living room sofa, the very sofa where we had celebrated positive pregnancy tests and dreamed of our future, and confessed that he was in love with someone else. Her name was Vanessa. She wasn't a stranger. She was the real estate agent who had sold us this very house. She was bubbly, ambitious, and, most importantly to Arthur, entirely unburdened by the physical and emotional exhaustion of a high-risk pregnancy. He moved out the next day, leaving me to navigate the swollen ankles, the crushing fatigue, and the terrifying prospect of single motherhood all by myself. The divorce was swift, ruthless, and remarkably devoid of emotion on his part. He fought for his equity in the house, his pristine vintage car, and his freedom, while leaving me with half a broken life and a court-ordered child support agreement that felt like a pathetic band-aid over a bullet wound. On this particular Tuesday, the loneliness was a physical ache. I had spent the evening organizing baby clothes, tiny, ridiculous socks and onesies with little ducks on them, trying to drown out the sound of the thunder rumbling over the Pacific Northwest. I reached for the mug of raspberry leaf tea on my nightstand when it happened. It wasn't a subtle twinge. It was a vicious, breathtaking seize in my lower abdomen that caused my knees to buckle. I gasped, grabbing the edge of the dresser, the wood biting into my palms as the pain radiated through my back. Before I could even process the contraction, I felt a sudden, unmistakable gush of warm fluid soaking through my maternity leggings and pooling onto the hardwood floor. My water had broken. I was only 38 weeks along, but my daughter had clearly decided she was done waiting. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I was completely alone. I waddled awkwardly to the bed, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts as a second contraction rolled over me, stronger than the first. I fumbled for my phone on the mattress. My hands were shaking so violently I dropped it twice before I could unlock the screen. My first instinct, driven by years of habit, was to call Arthur. Despite the betrayal, despite the divorce, he was the father of this baby. Surely, in a moment of absolute emergency, the man I had loved would put his selfishness aside. I tapped his name. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, the brutal, sterile click of the call being forwarded to voicemail. "Arthur, please," I sobbed into the receiver, squeezing my eyes shut as another wave of pain hit. My water broke. "The contractions are close. I need you. Please, just this once. I need you. Call me back." I hung up and frantically scrolled through my contacts. I called Brenda, my next-door neighbor and closest friend. Voicemail. She was in Chicago for a marketing conference. I had completely forgotten. I called Greg, my brother, who lived 3 hours away in Portland. It went straight to voicemail. He worked night shifts at the hospital and always kept his phone on silent. The digital clock on my nightstand glared at me. 11:42 p.m. The storm outside was intensifying, the wind howling through the old oak trees lining Elm Street. Another contraction seized my body, this one so intense it forced a guttural moan from my throat. I dropped to my hands and knees on the bedroom rug, panting like a cornered animal. I started counting the seconds between the pain. 4 minutes. They were only 4 minutes apart. My body was rapidly progressing, completely ignoring the fact that my mind was drowning in sheer panic. I had no one. If I called an ambulance, the dispatch wait times during severe storms in our area were notoriously long. The local news had just warned about flooded roads and strained emergency services. If I waited, I risked giving birth on my bedroom floor, alone, with no medical help for my high-risk pregnancy. Survival instinct is a terrifying primal thing. It strips away all your sorrow, all your self-pity, and leaves you with nothing but raw adrenaline. I dragged myself upright, my fingernails digging into the drywall for support. I grabbed the pre-packed hospital bag sitting by the door, slinging the heavy canvas strap over my trembling shoulder. I grabbed my car keys from the kitchen counter, knocking over a stack of unopened mail, mostly bills bearing my newly reverted maiden name. "Okay, baby girl," I whispered to my stomach, my voice trembling but laced with a newfound, desperate resolve. "It's just you and me. We're going to do this ourselves." I opened the front door and stepped out into the freezing, blinding rain. The cold hit me like a physical blow, instantly soaking my thin sweater. Every step down the driveway was a monumental battle against my own body. The world was dark, wet, and indifferent to my suffering. But as I reached the handle of my Honda Civic, I knew that no matter what it took, I was going to get us to St. Jude's Medical Center. I had to. Getting into the driver's seat of a compact sedan when you are 9 months pregnant and in active labor is an exercise in pure torture. I had to push the seat back as far as it would go just to accommodate my massive belly, but doing so meant my toes could barely graze the pedals. I was soaked to the bone, shivering violently, and crying tears that mixed seamlessly with the rainwater dripping from my hair. I shoved the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered in the cold dampness before finally roaring to life. I cranked the heat to maximum, though it did little to combat the icy dread settling in my chest. Reversing out of the driveway, my foot slipped on the brake as a ferocious contraction tore through my midsection. I slammed on the brakes just before backing into Brenda's stone mailbox. "Breathe, Jessica. Just breathe." I coached myself aloud, my voice echoing hollowly in the dark cabin of the car. I shifted into drive, my knuckles white as I gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2. The drive to St. Jude's was exactly 8.4 miles. On a normal, sunny afternoon, it was a breezy 15-minute trip down Interstate 95 and a couple of suburban side streets. Tonight, in the torrential downpour and absolute darkness, it felt like a suicide mission. The rain was coming down in thick, relentless sheets. My windshield wipers, wildly flailing back and forth on their highest setting, couldn't clear the glass fast enough. The streetlights on the main road flickered ominously, casting long, warped shadows across the flooded asphalt. I drove at a creeping 20 miles per hour, my hazard lights flashing into the abyss. 3 miles in, the contractions escalated from agonizing to apocalyptic. The pain didn't just radiate, it exploded from my spine, wrapping around my stomach like a vise of hot iron. My vision blurred. I had to pull over. I swerved onto the narrow shoulder of the highway, threw the car into park, and let out a blood-curdling scream that tore my throat raw. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against the steering wheel, sobbing uncontrollably. Why me? The thought invaded my mind, toxic and bitter. Why am I doing this alone? Where is he? My phone buzzed in the cup holder. The screen lit up in the dark car. It was Arthur. For a split second, a pathetic, desperate wave of relief washed over me. He had gotten my voicemail. He was calling to say he was on his way, to ask where I was, to apologize for being unreachable. My trembling fingers fumbled for the device, and I hit accept, putting it on speakerphone. "Arthur." "Thank God," I gasped, my breathing shallow. "I'm in the car. I'm on the 95. The contractions are so bad, Arthur, I can barely drive." "Jessica, calm down," his voice cut through the speaker. It wasn't panicked. It wasn't worried. It was annoyed. "I got your dramatic voicemail. Listen, I can't deal with this right now. Vanessa is having a crisis. We're at the ER." The words hung in the suffocating air of the car, entirely incomprehensible. "What? What are you talking about? I am in labor. Your daughter is coming." And Vanessa had a severe panic attack. "She's hyperventilating, and I had to rush her to the hospital," he snapped back, the defensive edge in his tone unmistakable. "You're not the only one who experiences stress, Jessica. The divorce has been hard on her, too. Call an Uber or an ambulance? I don't know. St. Jude's is right up the road from you. I'll check in tomorrow. Click. The line went dead. I sat there, the phone glowing mutely in the cup holder. He hung up. My ex-husband had just abandoned his child's birth because his mistress was having a panic attack about the stress of ruining my marriage. The shock was so profound it momentarily eclipsed the physical pain of labor. A terrifying, icy numbness spread from the center of my chest. Then, the numbness ignited into pure, unadulterated rage. That rage became my fuel. I threw the phone into the passenger seat, slammed the car into drive, and merged back onto the highway. I didn't care about the rain anymore. I didn't care about the blinding headlights of a passing semi-truck that nearly ran me off the road. I screamed through the next 3 contractions, gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought it might crack under the pressure. I was a woman possessed by a mother's fierce instinct to survive. I saw the glowing red emergency sign of St. Jude's Medical Center looming through the fog like a beacon. I swerved into the ambulance loading zone. I didn't care about parking laws and slammed the car into park. I left the engine running, the door wide open, and dragged myself out into the pouring rain. My hospital bag banged clumsily against my legs as I hobbled toward the sliding glass doors. A security guard saw me first. He shouted something to a nurse, and suddenly, a wheelchair was being rushed toward me. I collapsed into it, my head falling back against the vinyl seat, gasping for air. "I'm having a baby," I managed to choke out to the triage nurse, a kind-faced woman with tired eyes. "My water broke an hour ago. The pain is non-stop." "We've got you, honey. We've got you," the nurse said, already shouting orders for a labor and delivery team as she wheeled me rapidly through the bustling, chaotic waiting room. As we rounded the corner past the registration desks, my bleary, tear-filled eyes caught sight of a familiar figure standing by the billing counter. He was wearing the expensive navy trench coat I had bought him for our anniversary last year. He had one arm wrapped protectively around a petite blonde woman who was sipping water from a paper cup and dabbing at her perfectly dry eyes with a tissue. It was Arthur and Vanessa. They were here, at St. Jude's. As the nurse pushed my wheelchair past them, Arthur casually glanced up from the clipboard he was signing. Our eyes locked. For a fraction of a second, the universe froze. I saw the color completely drain from his face as he took in the sight of me drenched, pale as a ghost, leaving a literal trail of amniotic fluid and blood on the linoleum floor, completely alone. He took a step forward, his mouth opening to speak. But before he could utter a single word, another monstrous contraction seized me, and I threw my head back, letting out a primal scream that silenced the entire emergency room. The echo of my own scream seemed to bounce off the fluorescent-lit walls of the emergency room, freezing everyone in their tracks. For a terrifying, suspended second, the bustling chaos of St. Jude's Medical Center ground to an absolute halt. The triage nurse pushing my wheelchair didn't miss a beat, though. Her grip tightened on the rubber handles, and she shoved me forward with a renewed, fierce urgency, the wheels squeaking loudly against the wet linoleum. Arthur snapped out of his shock. He dropped the clipboard onto the billing counter. It clattered against the plastic divider, and he lunged toward us, completely abandoning Vanessa, who was still dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Jessica!" Arthur yelled, his voice cracking with a frantic edge I hadn't heard since our college days. "Jessica, wait! Stop the chair!" He reached out, his hand grasping the damp fabric of my hospital gown near my shoulder. The physical contact sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated revulsion through my system. It was the same hand that had signed the divorce papers, the same hand that had just been wrapped protectively around the woman who destroyed my family. "Don't you dare touch me!" I snarled, my voice raspy and breathless as another wave of agonizing pressure built in my lower back. I swatted his hand away with a strength I didn't know I possessed. The triage nurse, her badge read Jackie, immediately positioned herself between my wheelchair and Arthur like a fiercely protective guard dog. "Sir, step back immediately," Nurse Jackie commanded, her tone leaving absolutely no room for negotiation. "This patient is in active, advanced labor. You are interfering with a medical emergency." "I'm her husband!" Arthur protested, his face flushing a deep, mottled red. He looked around wildly, suddenly hyper-aware of the judgmental stares from the other patients in the waiting area. "I have a right to be back there. That's my baby." "He's my ex-husband," I gasped, clutching the armrests of the wheelchair so tightly my knuckles turned white. And he is not my emergency contact. Keep him away from me. Nurse Jackie didn't need to hear another word. She signaled to a burly security guard standing near the metal detectors. Officer, keep this man out of the maternity ward. He is not on the approved visitor list. As Jackie wheeled me rapidly down the long, sterile corridor toward the elevators, I twisted my head slightly to look back. Arthur was arguing with the security guard, his hands wowing frantically. Behind him, Vanessa had finally stood up, looking utterly humiliated by the public spectacle, shrinking away from Arthur rather than supporting him. The heavy wooden double doors of the labor and delivery unit swung open, swallowing me into a world of bright lights and intense clinical urgency, severing my view of them completely. The transition from the chaotic ER to the delivery room was a blur of frenzied motion and sharp, terrifying medical jargon. I was transferred onto a rigid delivery bed, my wet clothes stripped away and replaced with a dry, warm hospital gown. Nurses surrounded me like a well-rehearsed pit crew. Monitors were strapped tightly to my swollen belly, blood pressure cuffs squeezed my arm, and an IV needle pierced the back of my trembling hand. Dr. Harrison, a seasoned obstetrician with calm, reassuring eyes and silver hair, walked into the room snapping a pair of latex gloves onto his hands. He took one look at my monitors, and his calm demeanor shifted into a sharp, focused intensity. Jessica, I know you're in a tremendous amount of pain, but I need you to focus on me, Dr. Harrison said, leaning over the bed. Your blood pressure is dangerously high, and the baby's heart rate is decelerating with every contraction. Because of the high-risk nature of your pregnancy, we don't have the luxury of time here. You are completely dilated. We need to get this baby out right now, or we are rushing you to the OR for an emergency C-section. The words decelerating heart rate slammed into my chest harder than any contraction. Panic, cold, and sharp overrode the physical agony. I couldn't lose her. After losing my marriage, my home, and the future I had meticulously planned, this baby was the only light I had left. I couldn't let my body fail her too. I'll push, I sobbed, gripping the bed rails. Tell me what to do. I'll push. Okay, listen to me, Nurse Jackie said, leaning close to my ear, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. You are not alone, Jessica. We are your team today. When the next contraction peaks, I want you to take a deep breath, tuck your chin to your chest, and push like your life depends on it, because hers does. The monitor next to the bed began to beep with a frantic, irregular rhythm. The baby was in distress. The stress of the drive, the confrontation in the lobby, the sheer trauma of the evening was taking its toll on the tiny life inside me. I closed my eyes, summoning every ounce of rage, heartbreak, and love I possessed. I thought about Arthur, comfortably holding Vanessa's hand in the waiting room while she had a panic attack, while I was literally fighting a battle of life and death. The injustice of it was a bitter pill, but it was also the ultimate adrenaline rush. I felt the familiar, terrifying tightening begin in my abdomen, rising like a dark, crushing tidal wave. Here it comes, Dr. Harrison announced, positioning himself at the foot of the bed. Give me everything you have, Jessica. 1, 2, 3. Push. I bore down, squeezing my eyes shut so tightly I saw bursts of white light. A primal, guttural roar ripped from my throat, drowning out the frantic beeping of the fetal monitor. The pain was beyond human comprehension. It felt like I was being torn apart from the inside out, but I didn't stop. I pushed until my lungs burned, until I felt blood vessels popping in my face, until the world narrowed down to nothing but the desperate need to save my daughter. Good, good. The head is crowning, Dr. Harrison urged, his voice urgent but encouraging. The cord is wrapped loosely. I'm slipping it over the shoulder. Give me one more push, Jessica. Bring her home. Again! Nurse Jackie yelled over the mechanical din of the room. I gasped for a jagged breath of air, my chest heaving wildly. My entire body was shaking, slick with sweat and exhausted beyond any measurable limit. But the thought of my daughter's slowing heart rate fueled a final, desperate surge of energy. I dug my heels into the stirrups, gripped the handles of the bed, and pushed with a ferocity that felt almost supernatural. A sudden, immense release of pressure followed, leaving me gasping and falling back against the pillows. For 3 agonizing seconds, the delivery room was dead silent. There was no crying. There was only the sound of my own ragged breathing and the terrifying absence of a baby's wail. My heart stopped in my chest. I scrambled to prop myself up on my elbows, my eyes wide with sheer terror, searching the faces of the medical staff. Doctor. Harrison was working quickly, vigorously rubbing a tiny, bluish form with a rough towel. Why isn't she crying? I screamed, the panic tearing through my raw throat. Why isn't she crying? And then it happened. A small, sputtering cough, followed immediately by a fierce, indignant wail that pierced the sterile air of the hospital room. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in my entire life. She's okay. She's perfect, Dr. Harrison smiled, his shoulders visibly dropping with relief. He quickly clamped and cut the cord before stepping toward me. He placed the screaming, wriggling, slippery weight of my daughter onto my bare chest. The moment her skin touched mine, the rest of the world simply ceased to exist. The trauma of the divorce, the nightmare drive through the storm, the bitter betrayal in the lobby, it all evaporated into the heavy, humid air of the room. I wrapped my trembling arms around her tiny, fragile body, pulling her close to my heart. She had a mop of thick, dark hair and furious, tightly clenched fists. "Hi, Maya," I whispered, choking on heavy, joyous sobs. I kissed the top of her warm head, breathing in the metallic, sweet scent of new life. "I've got you. Mommy's got you. It's just you and me, baby girl." The next hour was a haze of medical procedures. Dr. Harrison delivered the placenta and carefully stitched up the severe tearing I had suffered during the rapid delivery. Nurse Jackie helped me clean up and transition Maya into a swaddle, marveling at how beautifully she latched for her first feeding. Through it all, I never took my eyes off my daughter. I felt a profound, unbreakable shield forming around us. I wasn't just a discarded wife anymore. I was a mother. I was a protector. Around 3 a.m., the adrenaline finally began to crash, leaving me utterly depleted. I was moved to a quiet, dimly lit postpartum recovery room on the fourth floor. Maya was sleeping soundly in the clear plastic bassinet beside my bed, her tiny chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. The storm outside had finally broken, leaving behind a quiet, rain-washed Seattle morning. I was just closing my heavy eyelids when there was a soft knock on the door. It wasn't a nurse. The door creaked open, and a tall figure stepped into the shadows of the room. It was Arthur. He looked awful. His expensive trench coat was wrinkled, his hair was disheveled, and the arrogant, dismissive demeanor he usually carried had completely vanished, replaced by a hollow, desperate exhaustion. He stood near the doorway, his eyes darting from me to the bassinet. "Jessica," he whispered, his voice trembling. "They wouldn't let me up." I had to wait until the shift changed to slip past the front desk. I didn't move. I didn't reach for the call button. I simply stared at him, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no lingering attachment. Just a cold, hard indifference. "What do you want, Arthur?" I asked, my voice flat and devoid of any emotion. He took a hesitant step forward, his eyes filling with tears as he looked at the sleeping baby. "I made a mistake. God, Jess, I made such a huge mistake. When I saw you in that lobby, bleeding, in so much pain, alone, it broke me. I realized what I've done." "You didn't realize it when you handed me divorce papers at 6 months pregnant," I asked quietly, not letting him off the hook. "You didn't realize it when you ignored my frantic phone calls tonight? You didn't realize it when you prioritized Vanessa's fake panic attack over the birth of your own child?" Arthur flinched as if I had physically struck him. "Vanessa left," he admitted, his voice cracking. "She saw you in the lobby, and she saw how I reacted. She told me I was a monster. She called a cab and left me at the ER. Jess, I have nothing. I threw away my family for an illusion. Please, just let me see my daughter. Let me hold her." He reached his hand out toward the bassinet. "Stop right there," I commanded, my voice slicing through the quiet room like a scalpel. Arthur froze. "You signed away your rights to the house, and you fought tooth and nail to minimize your child support to protect your precious lifestyle," I said, my gaze locking fiercely with his. "You legally established yourself as a visitor in her life. Tonight, when she needed her father, you weren't there. When I needed my partner, you were busy coddling the woman who helped you destroy my life." I pressed the red call button attached to my bed rail. "Jess, please, don't do this," Arthur begged, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. "I'm her dad." Biology makes you a father, Arthur. Showing up makes you a dad. And you didn't show up. I looked at him, completely unbothered by his tears. I drove myself through a hurricane while in active labor. I almost lost her because my blood pressure spiked from the stress of you abandoning us. I did the hardest thing in the world completely alone, which means, from this moment forward, I don't need you. And neither does she. The heavy door swung open, and Nurse Jackie stepped in, accompanied by 2 large security guards. She took one look at Arthur and immediately pointed to the hallway. "I told you downstairs, sir. You are not on the patient's visitor list," Jackie said sternly. "Escort him off the premises. If he returns, call the police for trespassing." Arthur looked at me one last time, his face a portrait of absolute devastation. He had finally realized the magnitude of his choices. He had gambled his family for a fleeting fantasy, and he had lost everything. The guards flanked him, firmly guiding him out of the room. He didn't fight them. He just kept his eyes fixed on the plastic bassinet until the heavy wooden door clicked shut, severing him from our lives forever. The room fell silent again, save for the soft, rhythmic breathing of my daughter. I reached into the bassinet and gently stroked Maya's soft cheek with the back of my hand. She stirred slightly, leaning into my touch. I had started this night completely broken, entirely convinced that I had no one. But as the first rays of the morning sun pierced through the hospital blinds, illuminating the tiny, perfect face of my baby girl, I knew the truth. I wasn't alone. I had everything I would ever need, right here in this room, and I had the strength to protect it, no matter what storms lay ahead. The next 48 hours in the maternity ward were a cocoon of exhaustion and healing, completely insulated from the wreckage of my former life. I spent hours just staring at Maya, memorizing the exact curve of her tiny button nose and the way her delicate fingers curled instinctively around my thumb. Nurse Jackie had become my unofficial guardian angel, ensuring that my room was flagged as a restricted access zone. Arthur hadn't tried to breach the floor again, and my phone remained mercifully silent. On Thursday morning, the day I was scheduled to be discharged, the Seattle sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue, a stark contrast to the apocalyptic storm that had served as the backdrop for my daughter's birth. I was packing my hospital bag, folding the tiny, unused newborn outfits I had so frantically thrown together, when the room phone rang. "Jessica?" "It's the front desk." The receptionist's voice crackled through the speaker. "There is a woman down here asking to see you. She says it's urgent. Her name is Vanessa Hastings." My hands froze on the zipper of my duffel bag. Vanessa. The mistress. The woman who had picked out the crown molding in my living room and then decided she wanted my husband to go with it. A surge of protective anger flared in my chest, hot and fast. My immediate instinct was to tell them to call security. But another, quieter voice in my head, a voice fueled by newfound confidence, told me to face her. I wasn't the scared, pregnant, abandoned wife anymore. I held all the power now. "Send her up," I replied, my voice steady, "but have security wait outside my door." 5 minutes later, a timid knock preceded the door opening. Vanessa stepped into the room. If I hadn't known it was her, I might not have recognized the woman standing before me. The polished, aggressive real estate agent who always wore immaculate silk blouses and designer heels was gone. She was wearing an oversized gray sweatshirt, her blonde hair was pulled back into a messy knot, and her eyes were heavily bloodshot, underscored by dark, bruised-looking circles. She hovered near the doorway, her gaze flickering nervously to the bassinet before landing on me. "I only need 3 minutes," Vanessa said, her voice shaking violently. "I know I have absolutely no right to be here, Jessica. I know you hate me. You should hate me. You have 2 minutes," I said coldly, crossing my arms over my chest. I didn't offer her a chair. Vanessa swallowed hard, clutching a thick manila envelope against her chest like a shield. "Arthur didn't just leave you because he fell out of love, Jessica. And he didn't pursue me because he was looking for a soulmate. He used me, just like he used you." I narrowed my eyes. "What are you talking about?" "When we were in the ER lobby on Tuesday night," she began, taking a shaky breath. "I wasn't having a panic attack because of the stress of the divorce. I was hyperventilating because of what I had just found in the trunk of his car. We were supposed to be driving to a late dinner. He asked me to grab his umbrella from the back. His briefcase had spilled open." She took a step forward and placed the heavy manila envelope on the edge of my rolling tray table. Arthur is completely bankrupt, Jessica, Vanessa whispered, the revelation hanging in the sterile air. He didn't fight for his equity in your house out of spite. He fought for it because he is over $500,000 in debt to a private equity firm. He has a severe offshore gambling addiction. He's been hiding it for years. My stomach plummeted, but I kept my face utterly blank. That's his problem now. No, you don't understand, Vanessa urged, tapping the envelope frantically. Before the divorce was finalized, he took out a massive second mortgage on your Elm Street house. He forged your signature on the documents, Jessica. He used his connections at my brokerage firm to push the paperwork through without you ever being present. The money he got from the divorce settlement? It's already gone. He was planning to marry me next month so he could get his name on my properties and liquidate my assets to pay off his bookies. The sheer scale of the betrayal threatened to knock the wind out of me. The man I had shared a bed with for 5 years wasn't just a cheater. He was a desperate, calculated criminal. He had left me alone to give birth not just because he was selfish, but because his entire house of cards was collapsing in real time, and he was scrambling to find a way out. I took pictures of everything in his briefcase before I walked out of that hospital, Vanessa continued, tears finally spilling over her lashes. Bank statements, the forged notary stamps, the threatening letters from his creditors. It's all in this envelope. I'm turning myself into the real estate commission this afternoon for ethical violations, but I wanted you to have the proof first. She looked at me, a broken, hollow shell of a woman. When I saw you bleeding on that floor, entirely alone, and I saw how easily he lied to my face about wanting a life with me, it woke me up. I am so deeply, truly sorry for my part in breaking your family. You didn't break my family, Vanessa, I said, my voice shockingly calm as I reached out and pulled the manila envelope toward me. Arthur did. You were just his collateral damage. But thank you for giving me the ammunition to finish this. Vanessa nodded once, swiped at her face, and turned around, walking out the door and out of my life forever. I didn't waste a single second. I picked up my phone and called Olivia, the ruthless, shark-like family law attorney I had used for the initial divorce. When I told her what was in the envelope, I could practically hear her smiling through the receiver. Within 2 hours, Olivia had filed an emergency ex parte motion. With the irrefutable evidence of financial fraud and forgery, a judge instantly froze Arthur's remaining assets, issued a restraining order, and awarded me sole, undisputed legal and physical custody of Maya. The fraudulent second mortgage was flagged for a federal investigation, meaning Arthur was looking at severe prison time. By noon, Nurse Jackie was wheeling me out the front doors of St. Jude's Medical Center. The sun was blindingly bright, warming my face as I stood up from the wheelchair. I carefully clicked Maya's car seat into the back of my Honda. I took one last look at the emergency room doors, where my old life had violently ended just 2 nights ago. I had arrived completely broken, terrified, and convinced I had no one. But as I slid into the driver's seat, glancing in the rearview mirror at the sleeping, peaceful face of my beautiful daughter, a fierce, unbreakable smile spread across my face. I had survived the storm. Arthur was going to face the absolute ruin he had engineered for himself, and I was going to give my daughter the world. I started the engine, shifted into drive, and drove us home. If my story of betrayal, survival, and ultimate revenge kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and share this video with anyone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out on these incredible true life stories. What would you have done if you found that manila envelope? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.